Baylor football should be really good next year, but they need to fix this immediately. Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Still breaking down the postmortem here of Baylor's loss to LSU in the Texas Bowl. 44-31, the final in that one. We're going to take a look at what Dave Aranda said after the game is kind of the biggest need for Baylor to address in this offseason. And then we'll go and look at how they can address that need and taking a look at some of the bowl game buildup. Maybe the writing was there on the wall for this loss, but we didn't know until basically the day of the game. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Watching the Texas Bowl, it was pretty easy to pinpoint where Baylor struggled. In fact, there were some things that they struggled at that they hadn't struggled with in a long time. But if you just watch that game, knowing none of the context of it, none of the opt-outs, none of the who wants to be here, none of what each team was good at going into this game, you would look at that game and you would say, wow, both teams need to improve their secondary. But specifically Baylor, I mean, they were getting burned all first half, and I mean a good chunk of the second half too. Now, of course, you do have a very good quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier on the other side. He became put second on the LSU all-time list for passing yards in a season. There's only been two LSU quarterbacks to throw for 4,000 yards in a season. It is Garrett Nussmeier and Joe Burrow. Which means, yes, he did surpass Jaden Daniels, the 2023 Heisman Trophy winner in his first year starting. Yeah. So good quarterback is what I mean to say by that. But Baylor got crushed in that secondary, one that I thought was getting better throughout the season, but it had not. And Dave Aranda did not hold back when talking about what his team needs to address in this offseason.
Yeah, I think it's got to start with attention to detail. I think it has to start with a stronger care factor. I think it's got to start with finding examples in practice that can lead to games. I think for me, I have to do a better job of leading that group. I have to do a better job of demanding more of that group. I think that that's an area that's first and foremost in my mind of, there's a bunch of things looking, we're losing guys in this position group and that position group and this other position group, and we're trying to address them as we speak. But in my mind, that's the group right there that's got to take the biggest step forward. You look at our O-line, you look at our receivers, you look at our quarterback play, all of it just been under adversity at some point this year, and we're able to turn the corner. And we were just not able to do that with this particular group. And so it needs more attention than what it's getting right now.
Two things that stand out to me from that quote. First thing is after 13 games, especially in a season in which you turned your season around and, saved your head coach's job, had a 6-game winning streak in there. Like after all of that, when you hear that there needs to be better care factor from that group, that's alarming. I know I said this in yesterday's show, the term alarming. You can't, that is the last thing you want to hear. If you're going to tell me they're young or they just need to get better, they're not talented enough right now, that stuff you can work on. You can coach that. You can't coach care factor. And it's something that, to be totally honest, has waxed and waned tremendously through Dave Aranda's tenure, right? And Dave has said as much throughout these 5 years. He's not been shy to say when the care factor is not there, this being the most recent example. So that's a big issue. And that, I don't know how you turn that around with coaching or that's that's a player-led thing, you know? Like, because I've criticized the coaching staff in the past for not having the team ready to play, and I feel like those are two different things. You know, getting the team ready to play and being prepared versus wanting to play, like wanting to become better, wanting to compete. Those are two way different things. And the first quarter I saw yesterday, that was a defensive backfield that did not want to compete and did not compete. And you'll remember going into the season, there were a lot of question marks around this Baylor team, a lot. And I remember thinking confidently that one of the ones that isn't a huge question mark is the defensive backfield. Young guys that played last year, but you saw some promise from Caden Jenkins and DJ Coleman and Carl Williams and Chateau Reed. You can go on and on. Tevin Williams. And it just never came to fruition this year. They were never a very effective pass defense. We talked about that yesterday. Brian Kelly has talked about it. Like, it's not been an effective pass defense all year. The other thing that stands out to me from that soundbite is the way he ends it. By kind of saying, you know, like I just said, a bunch of question marks going into the season, but quarterback, check. Wide receivers, big question mark, check. Linebackers, you put a couple new starters in there, check. Offensive line, maybe the biggest question mark of the whole team, big check. Defensive backs, when they were asked questions all year, didn't have the answer. They didn't come around. The rest of the team did. Now, I would also say, and this is something we're going to talk about in the next couple of shows, is there's another unit out there, and that's defensive line, specifically outside, exterior, I guess, 5 technique defensive line, that has also not turned it around. But that defensive backfield, you came into the season thinking, you know, there's probably some growing pains there, but I think I'm going to feel real good about where that group is at the end of the season. You know, because we saw growing pains of some of these guys like Caden Jenkins last year. But then we see growing pains from those guys this year. And some of them are sophomores and some of them are juniors who are in their second year playing. But like at that point, we're talking 25 games, 23, 24, 25 games. Like that's no longer an inexperience excuse. And it might be a care factor. It might be a talent thing. But I was feeling good about this group going into this year, and they got shredded, just shredded by Nussmeier on Tuesday. They went well above their average defensively for passing yards allowed. It's about 240 during the year. Nussmeier threw for over 300 yards, and again was never uncomfortable. Never. I don't think he had many that were like really threading the needle. He had an easy day at the office. And Baylor's pass rush and Baylor's defensive backfield gave him that easy day at the office. Baylor's still cooking in the transfer portal, and they need to address that right away. Let's tell you who or how they can address that coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, let's talk to you about FanDuel. Y'all, the NFL playoffs are coming next week, which means we still have a week of regular season football, which means there's plenty of time for you to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets when that first $5 bet hits. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. It's so easy. I can do it. Okay. You're not just picking a winner. All right. You're picking who's going to score the first touchdown, over under on passing yards. I mean, you could even bet penalties in there. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I'm going to go into my inner John Taffer here on Locked On Baylor. It's my favorite reality show ever, Bar Rescue. Love it. Love seeing Taff get in there and change around some of America's best watering holes. It's great. I love the man. I love the show. And one of the things that John Taffer screams about in the intro to Bar Rescue is he says, I don't embrace excuses. I embrace solutions. So it would be uncouth for me to come on this podcast and tell you, here's how bad everyone sucked on defense, in a time where we can give you actual tangible solutions and not give you those solutions. If it's week 6, there's only so much I can give to you. I mean, truly, there's only so much I can give to you. But here in the transfer portal season, we can give you solutions here. And Baylor's done really well in the transfer portal. My stance on that has not changed. I compared it to Tech, which had I think still does, have the number 1 portal class in America. And they needed that a little bit more than Baylor did. They needed to replace a lot of stars, a lot of starters. Baylor didn't need to do that as much, but certainly they needed to do it on the defensive side and wide receiver. And I think they have brought in some guys who can plug and play as starters on the defensive side. Phoenix Jackson, Matthew Fobbs-White, Travion Barnes, Devin Turner. But you get the defensive backs they brought in. They brought in a couple of them. They're all safeties. And watching that game on Tuesday against LSU, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't have a moment in that game where I said, boy, Baylor can really use another stud safety. These guys are going to come in and they're going to plug holes because some of the safeties are leaving and what have you. But I looked at a team in LSU and a quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier who were finding one-on-one matchups on the outside. Wasn't because of slow safety help. It's because they were burning the cornerbacks. And we knew that was going to be something that you might need to take a look at. But again, going back to what I said last segment, there was still that belief, I think, amongst fans that this is going to turn around. The last couple of weeks have been solid. Maybe these guys have turned the corner and they're ready for big-time college football games. Was not the case on Tuesday in the Texas Bowl. So the safeties that you've added, I think, are great adds. But you got to figure out corner. If you can't cover in this league and in college football, major college football, you cannot win. And that's not even to say against SEC teams. Like you're not gonna compete for a Big 12 championship if you can't cover on the outside. I know it's not the Big 12 of 8 years ago, but there's some pretty complex offenses in this conference. And there are some dudes on the outside in this conference. So you're not going to be able to get by with this defensive backfield you have right now. Luckily, Baylor's done well in the portal, and the portal is still open in terms of getting guys. You can't, you've already put your name in by now. That part's over. But you're going to be signing guys here for the next 2 weeks, like until after classes start, pretty much. And Dave Aranda actually said in the postgame after the Texas Bowl, he said, no, we're still working. We're going to go back. We're going to get some, we're going to do some meetings, but we've got guys visiting campus. We got some deals to close. And so me, being the advanced football scout that I am, of course, I looked into On3, just give me the top 25 cornerbacks available in the transfer portal. And what I found were a couple of dudes who could really help Baylor, and specifically 2 that I'm going to highlight here. One is both effective guys. One of them has done it at the college level. One is more on potential. That sounded bad. He's not a moron, nor does he have the potential to be a moron, I guess, any more than we all do. He has more potential than what he's actually proven at the college level. There we go. I've got plenty of moron potential. You guys have not seen anything yet. But the first one is Michael Coates from the University of Nevada. Now, he is the one who has played. In fact, he's played very well. He was the Hero Sports Group of 5 All-American first team. And an all-inclusive All-America honorable mention this year. So if you're taking the Group of 5 guys, which Baylor has already dipped into that well and has done well in that well, this guy is one of the very best. One of the 2 or 3 best corners in all of Group of 5 and a 5th or 6th best corner in all of college football. Honorable mention. So yeah, he doesn't play in the SEC, but he's that dude. He led the team in passes defended, 17. That's a lot. 4 picks, 41 tackles. He had a pretty good game against SMU. Broke up a couple passes in that game, so he's done it. That's a team you're going to play next year, by the way. Defended 5 against Oregon State, and had 2 picks against Oregon State. A quasi Power 4 team, kind of. Group or Power 4 honorable mention team in Oregon State. And this guy has an amazing career, by the way, Michael Coates. You see this. He's a fifth-year guy, by the way, so he's coming in with 1 year. You're talking about trying to get the most out of him for one season, plenty of experience. And what's amazing is I looked at his bio on Nevada's website, and they go, senior year, junior year. He was a JUCO guy, so that's why he's got another year. And go back to high school, and he has got a 7-word high school bio. Did not play football in high school. What? I had to double check this. I was like, someone has messed up at Nevada. The good SIDs at Nevada. Someone has messed up in Reno. The papers didn't get there. The highlight tape didn't get there. No, my man did not play high school football. He said he tried 1 year. He gave up on it. He didn't play organized sports at all in high school. He was working at an arcade after high school graduation. These stories fascinate me because here's a guy who's clearly an elite athlete, like a top 1% athlete, and was like, yeah, you know what? He literally said, he's like, I started working at the arcade because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I found out I was meant for more. And so I'm going to go play Division I college football in a couple years and be a Group of 5 All-American. The best of his story probably has not happened yet. That's fascinating to me. And it's one of those intangible things that you look at through the portal and through recruiting to a lesser extent of what is this guy's story? What is he coming here to prove? Snacks Johnson came back to the program this past year to prove he could still play at this level. Keaton Thomas goes from West Virginia as a special teamer to JUCO to prove that, hey, I can start on a defense for a good team in the Power 4. And he becomes an all Big 12 guy. That's the next step for Michael Coates. And you've got a defense that needs a chip on its shoulder. And here's a guy with insane talent who has a chip on his shoulder. So that's the first one. The other one, we go off some more potential, okay? And that is Marcelo Barnes. He is from Marcellus Barnes. Sorry. See, this is what happens with the transfer portal. Okay. I'm going to learn all the names. Marcellus Barnes from Syracuse. He comes in, he would come in with 3 years of eligibility. He started most of the season this year for Syracuse as a true freshman. And he got hurt in November, and he has since entered the portal. He's a Chattanooga native. Neither of these guys are Texas natives. Coates is from Mississippi. He's a Chattanooga native, but when you look at his high school acumen, he was a top 25 corner in the country. He committed to Syracuse, which was kind of a surprise because he was an Adidas All-American, and he chose Syracuse over Georgia, Ole Miss, Florida State, and Baylor. Yeah, Baylor was in on him too. Baylor was in his top 5. And you want to talk about a guy who's, not the biggest guy in the world, 6'1", 170, but one who came into college football with a ton of potential and some good ball skills. I mean, he was playing this year. I mean, he had 3.5 tackles for loss. He had a couple. He had 6 interceptions in his senior year, which, look, take high school stats for what they are. But when you're a great corner, they don't usually throw at you. And that shows how many, what the ball skills were for him. And Baylor was in on him out of high school. Hey, man, Syracuse doesn't really do NIL. Here's a chance to come earn some money, play top-end Big 12 football, and we need you. Because I look at, a slight frame, right? 6'1", 170 with a ton of speed. To me, that says Corey Gordon. And you don't have Corey Gordon next year. It's either playing at Alabama or Cal. You've got one who has a ton of potential and not a lot of reps at the college football level. Not a lot, but certainly some. And you have one who has climbed up the ladder and is waiting to see what that school is that's going to take him to the mountaintop. And I would say one or the other, but for those of you watching the game and know the personnel for next year, and with a question of a care factor, you probably need to go out and get 2 corners. And that might be now. Most likely, you'll get either 1 or 2 in the spring portal window after the spring games. But to me, those are 2 terrific options for Baylor. Terrific options. One of the reasons their secondary got cooked in this game was because they didn't have one of their senior starters. And one of the reasons why they didn't develop a pass rush was because they were without one of their senior starters. And to me, that was the most disappointing part of this bowl game. We'll tell you what that was coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. It's the only place I go to buy tickets, y'all. So anything you want to buy a ticket for, that's a good place to get it. In fact, if you want to attend this 12-team college football playoff, we still got a couple of games left. Awesome experience. I'd love to go. All right. I've seen some great playoff games in the past. Wish I was at them. Great way to get at them is Game Time. Get to them is Game Time. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier than they've ever been. Filters out all that fluff, that stuff you don't want, just to see the incredible deals on great seats. You're not wasting your time. You're just seeing the best deals right up front. In fact, I'm using it for a game that I want to go to next week. I'm using it for a potential Valentine's Day present for my girlfriend, where it doesn't have to be games, any kinds of tickets. And what I love about it is I can go through those premium features. I can toggle the all-in pricing, and all I see are the best deals. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, and of course, that's guaranteed. So plenty of issues for Baylor on the field on Tuesday, but what was probably most disappointing of all was the issues that they had off the field. Now, we knew there were some guys who were questionable, guys like Carl Williams, who did play. We didn't know Michael Trigg was questionable. It sounds like he had a bit of a knock, an injury in the bowl buildup. But what disappointed me, and I'm sure many Baylor fans too, is the notice that we got about an hour before the game. Now, Foster Nicholas from the Baylor Lariat was the first one to put this out. It's the injury report for the Bears. So he was out, who was questionable. And then I noticed two senior defensive starters are out of this game. Not for an injury, not for an opt-out, not for the transfer portal, but for academic issues. The cornerback, Snacks Johnson, and the pass rusher, defensive lineman, defensive end, Steve Linton, were both out of this game for academic issues. And that really, like I'm sure it did for many of you as well, like really stuck in my craw. Man, like that is so frustrating when we talk about how much Baylor wanted to play in this game, how much Baylor wanted to make a statement, wanted to prove that they could play with these teams and earn some national respect. For all of that, and LSU being the team that didn't want to play, it's Baylor that didn't handle their business off the field. And that is really frustrating. Snacks Johnson, a guy who clearly has love for Baylor, like clearly came back, shouted out Dave Aranda so often, was trying to recruit guys in the transfer portal. Don't know what happened there. He was excited to play in the bowl game. Remember, he declared for the draft and said, I'm going to play in the bowl game. No, you're not. Steve Linton, guy who's had an off-the-field issue this year already. He got suspended. We didn't know what it was. We still haven't heard what that was. But that's a guy who was on school number 3. Probably didn't have the year he wanted to, although we had some big-time games, had some big-time plays. I was actually pleasantly surprised by Steve Linton's production this year. And he decided to mail in the rest of the fall semester as well. To me, that's inexcusable. And I don't want this to be like the sign of a larger culture thing here, because I think Baylor football's culture is in a really good place from what we can see from the outside. But when two of the subjects in this podcast are about two senior starters not being eligible to play academically in the bowl game and a worry about care factor in the defensive backfield, then there's something there. Like, you know what I mean? That's not what you want to hear. And it just like, it's one thing if you're battling a nagging injury, or even if you're opting out for the NFL draft. You know, we don't like to see that as fans, but you obviously understand it. But to just like punt the last couple of weeks of the fall semester and just thinking, yeah, whatever, who cares? It's my last game, my last class. Like, that's not how this works. And again, you're talking about two starters who have played a lot of games of college football. No wonder there's questions on the defensive side. It's disappointing more than anything. Snacks puts out a tweet saying how much he loves Baylor, and I believe him. But you got to take care of that business off the field. What kind of example is that? Steve Linton, maybe we know why it stopped number 3. Maybe we know why Dave Aranda was saying earlier in the year when he and Michael Trigg got suspended, saying, well, some other programs don't have the standard that we do. Yeah, maybe don't flunk your classes. Maybe don't just punt the last couple of weeks of the semester. That's just, talk about a care factor. That's not a care factor right there. And it's really disappointing. And I'm hoping that that care factor will not be a question for this team next year on the field, and maybe more importantly off the field, because I think this really hurt them in this game against LSU. Thought it definitely hurt them against BYU to not have Michael Trigg, Steve Linton, or Caden Jenkins out there. And again, we talk about a makeshift offensive line for LSU on Tuesday and a pass rush that garnered 0 sacks. Might have been nice to have Steve Linton in there. Might have been nice for him to pressure Garrett Nussmeier a little bit. But if you're not going to go to class, not going to finish up, not going to pass your classes, that's college football, man. It's not the pros. As much as you want it to be, it's not. And that's issues that Baylor doesn't normally run into. And I hope it doesn't happen again. Of course, I had someone in the Baylor media ask me, no chance LSU would have any academic ineligible players. And I said, probably not. Probably not. But some standards are different. And that was the most disappointing part of this for me. And you see that in pregame and you're like, wow, an hour before the game, all of a sudden that might move the line. Like, that's a real hurt for Baylor. That's 2 starters right there not playing because of that. And then you tip ball, pick 6, and your bell cow running back unfortunately goes out with an injury in the first quarter. And in retrospect, the game's over right there. But it starts with not preparing yourselves to play or to be eligible. And that's what's really disappointing. So a shout out to the guys that had to play in their places that probably weren't expecting to play, but they took care of their business and they wanted to put on the uniform. And that's kind of what it takes. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are there other culture things going on here at Baylor? Does that get better next year? I think I hope it's good culture next year because you got plenty of talent on this team. And who Baylor needs to go after in the portal. What was the worst part of this game for you? What is the biggest thing that Baylor needs to address in the offseason? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you like the video, like the video. If you hate the video, like the video anyway. But be sure to leave that comment. Be sure to like and subscribe. We are marching towards 3,300 followers because we're trying to get up to 4,000. That's big numbers for Baylor. Let's get that going. Tell your friends to subscribe as well, because you can find us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow. And I think we're going to talk a little bit of basketball tomorrow because the Bears are undefeated in the real season in basketball as well. We'll talk about that later on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.